Welcome to Nameless Debate Radio, where radioactivity is contagious. You can join us in broadening our minds on the Nameless Debates Discord via the link below, and even feature here yourself, if you've got what it takes.
An empty cup for no reason, because I'm going to dump the water out when I'm done.
I know, right? It's like you're going to dump the water out to inspect the cup. Why even bother filling it up?
Exactly. Dude, really good metaphor right there. So, on like a interesting wavelength, you're my buddy with DPC, with synchronicity and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just tagged you on Facebook in a fairly interesting exchange between us. And yeah, like I do think that there's going to be some really interesting overlap. Like I posted an article today from one of the kind of enlightenment authors that I enjoy listening to or reading rather. And Joshua came in with like a really good analysis about how it was kind of like a superficial, not very deep idea, but the premise was cool because it's the idea of like mining gold from the shadow. Now there's like a little bit of, there's value in there essentially. And, you know, that invariably led to us talking about his idea of synchronicity. And I think I'm getting him over into the space where we can start to at least think about it in terms of transcendence and omniphysics and, you know, a few other synonyms that will get into some foundational basis that you and him have already gone over a little bit. So I see some alignment happening, to put it vaguely.
Man, I'm hella keen for that. Really smart guy. I really liked the conversation that we had.
I want to get him over here.
Dude, you gotta invite him.
It's just like I'm not sure if he'd be interested in the interface. It seems like it's confusing for us old fucks.
Maybe you could come up with a little step-by-step guide for old folks like you.
Here's how you can do it if you're a silver fox.
I mean, it's a really, really awesome platform, you know.
It is. I've only recently, like, I got invited to another server, and I didn't even realize that, like, you have to be invited to servers, right?
Yeah.
You can't just like peruse through them, and it's like walking into a room.
No, you
people
can
are.
peruse through them. There's a couple of websites where people advertise their servers. Like Disboard is one of them.
What is it?
Disboard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like you know, a board of Discord servers basically, where they
Are there like philosophy ones? Like,
yeah, there's other philosophy ones. Yeah,
that's what we should do then. Like, go talking.
Definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that would be cool. Mostly, I don't do it because it's, you know, sort of a waste of time for me to go to other servers and talk because I won't be able to get a recording of me or anything, you know.
True.
The exchange just sort of becomes white noise, especially if I don't get anywhere.
Yeah, it's hard to like just walk in and slam a foundation down and be like, "Hey guys, stand here with me and let's talk about this thing that I'm standing on."
But I'd be definitely interested in like setting up like a local recording or something, and then you know, especially if you were interested in doing it with me, we could both go over to a couple of different servers and, you know, get a dialectic going. That
would be interesting, dude. And I mean, we'd probably have to find ones that were maybe a little bit more specific to like epistemology or ontology, metaphysics, perhaps.
I reckon the philosophy servers that I'm on would probably cater to the tone of what we want to talk about sufficiently for us to talk about it there.
Dude, actually, I was thinking about a thing earlier about how I might have a difference of opinion that I just imagined that it may not be an actual difference.
Oh, yeah?
Shall I spit it at you?
Of course.
Okay. So we both agree, since we share the same axiomatic basis, that a universal morality is possible to articulate.
Yes. In principle, at least.
In principle, thank you. So, and the principle of us kind of going back and forth and mapping out the words that we're using to describe this universal morality. Neither of us has really taken it upon ourselves to do that sufficiently, but I nonetheless have faith that we could do it given the amount of time and the motivation to do it.
Definitely.
Now, what I think stands in contrast to that is that if we don't do that, then the actual possibility of us claiming that there is such a thing as a universal morality, just because we can potentiate it between ourselves, that isn't apparent to others from the outside in until we do something of that.
I'm not sure that I accept that, but keep going.
Okay. So this is where I was like, I think this is where we might have some difference to like weed through.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I look at it and I go, if I don't accept that the potential for us to articulate a universal morality is possible, if I just reject that proposition and instead look at the fact of the matter that no such thing sufficiently exists with which I can point to as an object of either writing or a recording, then no such universal morality possibility presently exists anywhere other than in potential, loosely configured between our brains, if you will.
Continue.
Okay. So if I'm being honest, since we haven't written anything about it or recorded anything about it, the fact remains that no such possibility exists outside of our minds.
I'm confused by the way that you're using the word possibility.
Because if we weren't talking about it, it wouldn't be possible to people from the outside in thinking about it.
What do you mean by possible?
I think data logic is a necessary prerequisite for even starting such an enterprise.
Yes, but if we agree that data logic is at the basis of reality, then whether or not we're talking about it or know about it is irrelevant as to whether or not something is possible, right?
That's where I'm a little indifferent about, because I think that it's a little difficult to take the project of universal morality in the appropriate mindset, as it were, like to not be overzealous with it is what I'm thinking. If the kind of data logical axioms are not there underwriting the seriousness with which one would even need to employ in order to start, writing them out. Because to come up with data logic on its own, just, out of your ass, if you just started writing about universal morality, I don't think the idea of it would occur to the person that started that intention, as it were, ethically speaking. Like, I don't think that ethically minded people would think, well, how do I justify the foundation of everything that I'm asserting so that ontologically and epistemically all of my words are in perfect alignment with an objective and subjective distinction between reality and perspective of reality? And therefore, how do I garner the necessary persuasion to enhance others that I would need to get their agreement to form this intersubjective union of sorts?
Well, I mean, don't you think that the second bit of the statement that you just made sort of like denounces the first? Because you just said, well, like, how could I do that? And the only answer to that question is to figure out how people can agree, right?
Nice. Okay. Continue, actually.
Okay, so like you're saying like you don't think that the people who generally consider coming up with a universal morality to be concerned with ontology, is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, let's think about Kant though, right? Because Kant actually approached it in exactly the same way that I am. He just made a mistake near the end.
I agree.
And his essential like idea was, okay, so you have to qualify the world properly, and if you can qualify the world properly, then you can like describe a categorical imperative, right?
Yeah, precisely.
I think there's actually lots of Kantian style thinkers in the modern day. I've met quite a few of them.
That might be where I'm lacking then, brother, because I don't know that I have. And so that might be a part of my...
Well, I think the problem is that most of the people who think in the style that Kant did don't accept his... they don't conceive of it the same way that he did. So what they think is, well, because subjectivity is transcendental, you know, morality is arbitrary. That's basically the sort of reasoning that they take.
Yeah, and like I don't agree with that because of
no, I don't agree with that either. And
the
I don't think
information
that Kant. Yeah, I don't think Kant would have agreed with that, because the whole point that he made was that, like, based on the fact that the subject is transcendental, there is a transcendental law that governs all action, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, there's definitely some truth to that. I think that the first premise is wrong, because reality is not fundamentally subjective. But ultimately, the way that he was conceiving of the subject as transcendental made as its consequence the proposition that there would be some universally held principles.
Mm-hmm.
And he, so I'm saying, sorry, go.
Well, I think that those principles are derived from acknowledging the kind of biological mechanisms that underwrite everything that is doing the figuring.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in one way,
but there's
like
more to it than biology, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, and that's just like the starting point for most people's kind of incision into the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you cut the body to open up what its organs are inside. And I don't know why I'm going for a surgical analogy, but my idea is that, like, well, hold on. Too many ideas are coming to my mind right now. What I wanted to say more along the lines of is that the mistake that he made is the same mistake I think I made that you helped me correct, in that it seemed as though he was trying to be upfront or transparent with his assumptions in a way that invalidated them in the final analysis. Like, it's as if he thought that he called them paralogisms, or they were like, gosh, he had a really good definition of it that I'm not able to recall. Paralogisms, like imaginary logic is kind of what it seemed like he was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
And constraining the imagination accordingly allowed him to arrive at a unique vantage point of his own process of metacognition of the categorical imperatives that he was entertaining. So, like, I remember thinking when I first read a little bit of the critique of pure reason, or however it's worded, that if you could put possibly even a finer point on it, like all of the instances where the category of theft, to be specific, arise in an event within nature between two or more people or entities or whatever, agents, if and only if that instance of theft pertains to this circumstance. So the circumstance of, let's use it as an axe murderer knocking at your door, asking you the truth of whether or not anyone else is inside. And you, actually, this conflates a little bit of lying and stealing. Shoot, I messed it up. Let's say it's a thief instead of an axe murderer. And if no one's home, he will rob you. And if someone's home, he won't rob you. So if you lie about it, you save yourself from being robbed. And if you don't lie, you get robbed.
If you lie about it, what, by calling out no one's home?
Yeah. It's kind of a weird hypothetical that I'm coming up with here. But what I'm trying to think of is that, like, there's a way that you could actually parse that hypothetical in real terms where it's less imaginary than I put it. And if you were to get every detail of that specifically, every instance of that categorical imperative analysis. Shoot. You all right, buddy? I know, dude. You guys have been too rough on each other today. You got to knock first, okay? And ask.
It wasn't even locked.
Mm-hmm. Just because it's not locked doesn't mean you're invited in. No, you guys okay, Dante? Okay. So I'm doing a chat with Matt, okay? Let me, a chat with Matt. Will you guys get along for me? Okay.
I'm gonna just leave me alone.
I think Dante just wants some alone time, Sai. Well, maybe there's some morals that we can extract from all this.
Yeah, maybe.
But let me see if I can recapture my point. What I'm getting at is that, like, we can only categorically resolve those instances that are specific rather than general, because the general opens up too many hypotheticals, in my opinion. So it's like the intensity of the imperative needed to be dialed up just a notch and then turned back down. And then everything that he was saying was, as you put it in another recording, like a improvement on the golden rule, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, I kind of got us out into the bush a little there, but
That's okay, man.
thanks for at least hearing it out.
Yeah, you're good, dude. I'm just trying to track what you said, alright? So,
Okay. It was a little choppy for sure.
So when you said it, you can't use the categorical analysis on the general.
It seems, yeah, that seems to be my contention with it. And you can, but then it ultimately comes into, well, let's put it into a real world term. And in those real world terms, if you're even looking at like an actual historical event where as many of the facts are known, I think you could only conclude in hindsight what was categorically imperative or not at that point. Otherwise, it encounters, I think, too many hypothetical variables that make the generality just a useful tool in discerning whether or not you can or cannot make an imperative out of that category of circumstances.
I'm having trouble tracking what you're saying.
Let me see if
okay.
I think
so. What is the general in this discussion?
in this sense,
yeah.
like, let's say generally speaking, it's not okay to steal.
Okay, so you're saying that doesn't work because it ignores the nuance of real life. Is that correct?
Precisely. Thank you for simplifying that.
Okay, yeah, I follow that. All right. So then what were you saying about Kant again?
That it's as if he kept his analysis. I haven't read the whole works because it was too dense for me to get through, and I felt as though I grasped what he was getting at in a way that I could at least ask appropriate questions. And I think that's what I'm kind of presenting to you is some of my assumptions and questions that I have on it. The video that I sent was kind of like a thing that I felt Kant and I both shared in terms of, like, he made a mistake that wouldn't have been made had he had looked at everything that he was doing with the categorical imperative just from like 1 degree lower in his analysis. I think he would have encountered data logic if he had done that.
I think that's probably accurate.
Okay. And so seeing as how he didn't, it's as if everything that was hypothetically kind of potentiating itself to him caused a bedazzlement of his entire, framework that distracted him from the fundamental answer that was underwriting all of it, really.
I think definitely that's part of it, but I think another part of it is Einstein had created the theories of relativity by the time that I approached the problem. And that's directly where the idea of relativity being the foundation came from, because that's not my idea. That was actually Kyle's idea. Like, I was thinking about the problem, and I was trying to have a look at it. And initially when Kyle said the thing to me about relative nothing and whatever, and absence and the relationship between the two, I wasn't tracking him at all. I couldn't follow him. And then months later I came back to him, and I had grounded myself more in what he was trying to talk about. And when
Yeah.
I asked him about it, he told me what he thought, and I was like, okay, wait, I actually do understand that. And so what he was saying was basically like, you know, it's not a leap to say that relativity is like fundamentally involved in reality, because Einstein has already demonstrated that is the case. Do you know what I
True.
mean?
Oh yeah.
And so
Definitely.
like Kyle just made that simple observation. He said, okay, so relativity clearly is involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then he like gave me his analysis of how it was involved, and I was like, okay, I see what you mean. And for a long time, my analysis of how it was involved was pretty similar to his. Like I elaborated quite a bit more,
Right.
and I had to like, what would you say? I had to excavate the idea, because he just sort of had he uncovered the tip, and he was like, look at this. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. And so like I uncovered the rest of the mountain, and after I'd uncovered the rest of the mountain, it occurred to me that like it was upside down. I'm not too sure how. Like maybe it was like on an angle or something. So we thought what we thought was the tip was one of the corners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like
For sure.
what we had found was true, but the way that it looked was very not true.
What
Do
was
you know what I mean?
disorientingly, we encountered it in a disorienting way. Like you said, it was
Well,
upside down.
it's interesting, right? It's not exactly that it was disorienting. We encountered it in a way that matched perfectly our orientation. But the thing is that that
Mhm.
wasn't how it made sense.
Right. It had to be kind of flipped on its head in order to.
Exactly. Yeah, you had to take the mental metaphor that we use to grasp the world out of the equation. You have to say, okay, I understand that this is very useful to think, but is it true for this? And the answer is no. And then once you realize that it can't be true for that, the answer basically presents itself to you on the spot. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, the reason that that isn't true is the exact way that it still works, right? Because the fact that nothingness can't exist in order to cause things actually is the answer, right? Like
Yeah.
there's nothing more to it.
Like it should send a cascade of realizations that ultimately make you go, I never looked at it that way. And
Exactly.
if it doesn't do that, I sometimes wonder about either the delivery or the recipient. And I can't help but just put it into that binary, because it seems as though maybe it's true that there's something that's being said by us that's being structurally misconstrued by the recipient. I think I could put it in like computer terms, like as if we were trying to install a new game on an old operating system. It just wouldn't even load, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that? Like, obviously we can always improve our language in some way, but at a certain point, the hardware of the recipient kind of comes into question.
One sec.
Yeah.
I'm thinking what it's more like is it's more like you are adding a mod to the game that relies on components that were added in a later patch.
That seems a bit more detailed too.
Right, because it's not quite like because when you try to run a new game on an old computer, you have to upgrade the hardware. I wouldn't say we do upgrade the hardware exactly. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, your hardware, like everything is almost right. You can't use this like add-on, which would change the way that you view things. You can't use it because you're missing a couple of patches, right? You have it, for instance, let's say the epistemology patch. You're missing that one. Yeah, you need that patch, right? And it's like, and then there's like all right, so then there's objectivity versus subjectivity in terms of like whether or not science is the best method for demonstrating things, right? And it's like, okay, people need that patch because today, right, everybody has the science patch, and the science patch is really, really effective for doing things. But it also sort of like clouds your view in terms of what it does.
Indeed.
Because like you use the science patch to look at the science patch and you see it through the lens of science and you don't realize that there is another way to see it because of how useful the science patch is.
Precisely. Same thing with the pragmatics. That same exact frame of reference, I think, is almost the philosophical equivalent to the science frame of reference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that they're almost indistinguishable, really, because the scientific frame of reference is an elevation of utility in the way
Yes,
that the pragmatic theory of truth would dictate, right?
exactly right. So, okay, so that all tracks well. Now, trying to see how I can get this back into a little bit of the space where I think I was probably using a little bit too much confusion, or I was weeding through some of my own confusion on it. And I appreciate the simplicity or the simplifications you're helping me kind of find.
That's okay, man. I mean, I'm just trying to understand you. I wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Yeah, dude, you and me both, right? Like the thing that I really appreciated though about like Kant's attempt at getting to the heart of universal morality was that he obviously thought it was possible to technically use language or use language in a technical way so as to assert the rightness or wrongness or truth or falsehood of a situation. And I think we share that same drive or impulse, or it could very, very well be a virus. Like, I cannot stop thinking about this type of thing because my opinion is that if we do, the problem of politics and the problem of subjectivity, it kind of starts to lose its hard edge where most people kind of cut themselves on that edge. I don't think it has to be so violent or deadly at a certain point. Once some of these things that we end up talking about, the seriousness kind of can dissipate from the technical space. And I think that seriousness is there largely because there's this factor that you and I have kind of confronted in each other, in that I just want to track what you're saying and try to figure out and understand you because A, I value you. B, I know that you've helped me in more ways than, I can count on all of my appendages. And when we afford at least that amount of respect, that's like, I consider that like basic civil decorum in many respects. It's like benefit of the doubtism. That in and of itself allows the space for figuring out what's right or wrong with the present moment's perception, because right or wrong is already a misuse of language. We don't really have to use those terms. We could use harmonious or discordant, and there's still other words that we can use that would be synonymously approaching that paragon's edge of distinction. But look at all the work that you and I have done over the past couple of years. It's like we still haven't written all of it down to make this universal morality explicit, but nonetheless, we've talked about it enough to at least potentiate it as no, guys, you should try to at least help us figure this out, because we do feel like there's something to the consistency that you are exacting here. And I do think it's you that is exacting it, because I've tried to be at that same level of logical is kind of what it seems like. It's the same level of logic that you have naturally. I'm striving to get to that level of distinction, and it just doesn't exist for me in the same way because I'm a little bit more artistic.
Yeah, absolutely, man. But I think like that's part of what makes the conversations between us so productive, right? Is because like you're talking about it in the way that someone who can't quite pinpoint why they're right talks about it, and then
Yes.
I'm the opposite, right? It's like I can't really explain to you in colorful language what I'm talking about, but I can tell you exactly what it is, and then when we talk about it together, we reach this like happy middle ground, right? Which is like it has the characteristics of artistic and visionary expression, but it still maintains the rigor that is required to be making sense of the world in a
For
technical way.
sure, dude. And that's what I like to use with Anton. We've unified that apparent opposition between the colorful and the direct, let's say, or the visionary and the logician. And it's hold on one sec, dude. I gotta handle these kids.
Oh, good, dude.
All right, dude. Sorry. So yes, that's essentially why I use the word antinomy, because like Terence McKenna used the word coincidentia oppositorum, and I think that's a cumbersome way to say a coincidence of opposites, and it's not really a coincidence when I look at it. Like, there is no such thing as that. I still view it as like a deterministic necessity, that each word that comes out of my mouth that corresponds to the, I guess, linguistic interpretation device in your brain, and then that it comes back to me in a way that is, if we both just are simply making sense to each other, that in and of itself doesn't seem like a coincidence. It seems like we've cleared the stuff that would make that process problematic.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, if it like persists in continuity over time, right? Then it's like much more compelling.
Much more compelling, because like you've helped me alleviate, let's say, some of the persistent, I think they were like even grammatical errors, where I would end sentences with like I forget what it was last, but you helped me kind of look at it in a different way. I would say of or from a certain thing instead of, I would say meaning from. And you're like, why do you keep doing that?
Mhm.
There's no, like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
either
exactly.
meaning something or like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, you're right. Why do I keep springing from this word in a way? And that was what we could call like a unconscious movement that I was neurotically in some ways doing, because I didn't realize I was doing it. But it's like someone's tapping their foot or shaking their knee nervously because of whatever reason is making them anxious, and someone puts a hand on the knee to calm it. That's essentially what was happening in metaphysical terms to the things that were, going on in my own mind. So thanks for that hand on the knee, so to speak.
Yeah, no worries, dude. I love helping you out with stuff like that.
It's really useful. So now let's see. To the point of contention that I was trying to have, does it make a little bit of sense though to see how, like, in my springy way of doing things wrong unconsciously, I have this question of whether or not I can give myself the level of confidence in asserting a universal morality, in the same way that I've heard you do it, because of those same unconscious mechanisms that I'm still, like, bringing light to. And in doing so, I haven't found anything within myself that languages it in a way that isn't as complex as I'm putting it to you, to make it simpler to someone that wouldn't have the same, I guess, rapport that you and I have developed.
Okay, so I think that, like, it sounds like what you just said then was that like, in order to assert that there is such a thing as a universal morality, you'd have to be confident that you could articulate what it was. Is that right?
To a person other than you.
Okay, but let me put it to you this way, right?
Okay.
If what you're articulating isn't a universal morality, right? Then someone else can point it out to you. Isn't that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is accurate.
And so, like, And if someone else points it out to you and both of you agree about the fact that you aren't articulating what one might call the universal morality, doesn't the fact that you have agreed on that sort of imply that there is such a thing?
Holy shit! I didn't think about it that way.
Right? Because like, if you can agree with the other person that you haven't met the standard, then in principle there must be something that would meet the standard. Or if there isn't, then treating the issue in that manner would then meet the standard.
That's
Right?
it,
Because
man.
to think about it in the sense that there is no such thing as a universal morality, that could well be the thing that you denounce if that were the case. So I don't see a way around there being such a thing, because even if there weren't such a thing, then the correct manner of behavior would be to act as if there weren't. And if everybody did that, would that not be the thing that we're saying isn't there?
I got a little lost in that last part.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead again.
when someone says, that's so let's say it's not possible. Let's say that the universal morality isn't possible, right?
Okay.
Then we would say that everybody should act as if the universal morality isn't possible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so saying everybody should act as if X is a moral injunction. So if everybody should act as if the universal morality is impossible, then isn't there a universal moral injunction to that effect?
Wow, man, this is starting to bring up similarities or ring bells to Stefan Molyneux's universally preferable behavior, which is an attempt at a universal morality from the point of view of preference. And that if we prefer to have something, like if we prefer truth to falsehood, and we're engaging in a process of truth discovery, then that makes the preference of truth in a higher priority than that of falsehood.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if someone disagrees with you, they're demonstrating performatively
That they agree.
Yes, because they're trying to correct you.
That's exactly what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, cool. That makes pretty good sense then, actually.
Yeah, right. Like if someone tells you that you shouldn't be saying there is a universal morality, that's an appeal to the thing that you are saying is there. Because who are they to tell you what you should or should not say, right?
Yeah.
And if their like response is, well, it's just not true, then they're saying, well, because it's not true, everybody should agree that it's not correct to do. And then again, we stumble upon the universal moral injunction that we were talking about before. Because if we are all obliged, let's say, to treat what's true with the highest priority, then treat truth as the highest priority is a universal moral injunction. It has to be.
Dude, I love that. That sounds righteous as fuck.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean, right? I can't see a way around it, because if it were possible to disagree, right, then you either are disagreeing in the sense that the universal morality says that you're allowed to have your own opinions. Do you know what I mean? Or you're disagreeing in the sense that other people should share. So it's not your own opinion. And if other people should share it, it all of a sudden gets encompassed into the thing that we're talking about.
Yep. Wow, man.
So yeah, I'm not sure how to get around that. Whenever I try to consider, okay, maybe there isn't a universal morality in principle, I come up with this proposition. I go, okay, if it were the case that there was no such thing as a universal morality, then it would necessarily be the case that everybody should treat such a concept as ridiculous. But if everybody should do anything, then the concept can't be ridiculous, because we just like referred to it.
Right. And is there any way to equivocate there and be like, well, not everybody, it's whoever, you know, it seems incoherent, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're saying, like, the reason that we can't put forward the proposition that there is a universal human morality is that, like, is that not everybody holds the proposition that we should all adhere to truth to be the case. Don't you think that those individuals think that that proposition is true?
Yeah.
Like, they're adhering to their own personal truth. They're just like making a distinction between that and what other people think is true.
Right.
Because you can't, like, there's no way to conduct yourself in relation to not truth, right? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, and most people can't even fathom that would be a state of mind for them to occupy, because everyone acts as if they are right. Like, everyone thinks when they're
Exactly.
opening their mouth that they should in some way. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it.
You wouldn't be saying something if you didn't think it was true.
Yeah. Oh, man, this is like really helpful clearing out. Because I felt as though like what was lying ahead of us was this bound volume of, equal or greater length than the categorical imperatives of Kant, and all of the just all the technical.
I think it should be a lot simpler than that, though.
I do too. I think if it's not able to fit on a 8.5 by 11 paper, that it's not worth repeating ultimately. Like, it has
But that
to
doesn't
be.
necessarily mean that the working is going to be simplistic.
No, the work is what I think you and I are toiling over now. I was able to put the axioms of data logic into a tweet, 2 tweets actually. That was
Did you have to break it up?
I had to, yeah, and then I added a little bit
Damn.
because of it. But I was trying to get it into one because it's 280 characters, and if you can do that, that's that's being concise.
How far over was it?
It was the whole second axiom didn't fit.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So, and I tried to shorten whatever I could of it too, but the two combined tweets was it was close enough. And to me, that's the kind of simplicity that I think truth is ultimately attracting our minds towards, in a way, because it's not, to me, it's not finished until it can be translated to children. And when children can take it, it can sprout fertile in the minds of unbroken humans, so that we don't have to constantly repair human beings that are broken and adolescent and beyond, through addiction and misdirection and miseducation. And so, like, there's so many things that happen to human beings that are just off base, is one way to look at it. You're liking them right now?
Yeah, dude. I'm gonna retweet them.
Nice. Yeah, that was a fun exercise, and that's what I want to do. Axioms of universal morality. Like, we can find a way to get this so that it can be put into terms that, like, any average, like, blue collar worker could understand, or like, I think that's the task of philosophy, to find technical and accessible to the masses, and then find a way to put it into their language. Because in many ways, I think you and I consider ourselves to be somewhat blue collar. I know we're both not rich. Dude. So there is commonality in the ground we're standing on, and it didn't take you long. It took me longer to get to where I'm at today than it did for you. And I think of how it hopefully won't take as long for my kids to reach these same conclusions.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I was pushed into it to some degree, so
yeah,
that's
fair
probably
enough.
why. That's probably why it was quicker for me. But I think that now that the, let's say, what would you say, architecture of the thing that we're trying to describe has been, like, conceptually defined, it shouldn't be so difficult anymore to translate what we're saying into terms that will always make sense.
Yeah.
Instead of terms that make sense to the people who created them and the select few who are around them. I want to bridge that gap and create terms that you can understand even if you've never heard of them before.
Right.
And that's sort of what we're aiming at, right?
Absolutely. I think that's what you and Dark Master have been working on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. And this might be a good segue out, because I got 10% battery, and yeah.
Oh, good.
Thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and join us in the Nameless Debates Discord. We hope to see you there.